Hello everyone, it is a pleasure to be here today as I have in front of me Mr. Horacio Grigera Naón. He also changed my life a little bit. I always tell this story. I went to American University, to Washington College of Law, and I wanted to build a career on human rights. But something was not right. Someone told me that I was allowed to change my classes during the first week of school. So I said, hey, I'm gonna go to as many classes as I can and I will decide at the end of the week what I wanna do, because you know how parents are. Oh, you do human rights, you will starve to death. You won't have a job, you won't make any money. So I was going to do an LLM to Washington. It was not, let's say, a cheap decision. So I had my family here, and then I wanted to do human rights because I thought that's what I wanted to do. So I was divided. I'm sure many of you watching this video today share the feeling. So I went to Mr. Horacio's class. First class, it was Monday morning, I remember. It was a 3-hour class. And after the class, I said, Horacio, and I'm very sorry that I say this, but I wanted to be like you. So I got out. I remember I asked you for which classes should I take, because I really want to do arbitration for the rest of my life. I knew. I changed all of my courses. I did the business law route, the only one that I had available back then. But today you have an LLM on international arbitration, and this is fantastic. It's great to have you in front of me today. I'm sure that after this video, many other lives will be slightly derouted towards arbitration. What led you to the arbitration world?
I would like to thank very much Maria Rubert for organizing this event, for allowing me to participate. Maria Rubert was a student and a graduate at the Washington College of Law, and she has had a very interesting career in international arbitration, and it is always a great pleasure to run again into her now that she's well known and she's very active in the field. As to how I got involved in international commercial arbitration, what I must say, was entirely by chance. When I was a student in Argentina in the 1960s and 70s, arbitration was not known at all. The only thing that we knew at the law school is that there was a chapter at the Civil Code of Procedure in Argentina. But this chapter was never taught at the university. However, I also had an interest in private international law, and I was attracted, of course, by the Calvo doctrine, Carlos Calvo, the great Argentine jurist, who enunciated this doctrine at the end of the 19th century. And of course, the Calvo doctrine, as it was understood, superficially understood, sent a very nationalistic message in respect of arbitration. And of course, at that time in Latin America, we were very much influenced by the Andean Pact and ideas of nationalism. And I was not an exception to that. But I was attracted to the topic, and I started to study the topic. And because of different circumstances in life, I had the great privilege of spending a year and a half in Paris, France, at the Université de Paris II. And my patron, my director of studies, was Henri Batifol. And there was also a great professor, Professor Berthold Goldman, who was an ardent supporter of the transnationalization of the applicable rules of law through international arbitration. I didn't like very much the ideas of Goldman, but he incited me as Batifol to study the topic with more interest. And thanks to them, I obtained a research scholarship at the Hague Academy of International Law at The Hague, the Netherlands. which afforded me the opportunity to study arbitration in depth. And little by little, I started to understand the institution, to look at it with a critical eye, but without prejudice. Now, all of this was an entirely academic, intellectual interest. I was not thinking in making a single buck, as they say in the USA, a single dollar out of this. There was no economic interest. And to be quite frank, the first time I got an arbitration case, it was in the in the 1995, 1996. And my only message is follow your interests, follow your vocation. Don't think in money. At the end of the day, money will come.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. In line with the question that I made to you years back, what other things can they do to prepare for an arbitration career? Something that I tell them, for example, is the importance of languages, because if you know a lot about arbitration and you want to build a career in international arbitration, but you don't know a foreign language, you may be a little bit lost. What would you recommend to these students?
My personal story is not necessarily the story that any other people would like to have in order to get involved in arbitration. As I indicated before, when I started on this, there were no careers in arbitration. I was a general commercial lawyer at the beginning of my career, in addition to my interests in arbitration and private international law. I was an adjunct professor at the University of Buenos Aires in private international law, and also the law of international business transactions. As I said before, I had the privilege of having these scholarships, but I started my career clerking for a commercial judge in Buenos Aires. Then I became a general legal manager or general legal counsel for a financing institution in Argentina. All this was domestic work in the commercial and financial areas, in which what I was doing is contract law, corporations, even labor law, and the law of loan transactions, but at a domestic level. Only when I was in my 30s, I became part of the legal team of a very important transnational group based in Argentina, which had a bank, which had an oil and gas company, which had a fishing company, which had a paper mill, which had a construction company. And we had to do commercial work for all of these entities. But at the same time, this group started to have joint ventures and activities outside of Argentina. And my first experience with arbitration was to incorporate arbitration clauses in these contracts, normally referring to the ICC arbitration system. And because of that, we were the first in having actual arbitration cases from Argentina. Involving these corporations, but that we handled from Argentina. And so my exposure to arbitration was a very gradual one. And as I said before, I only got my first appointment as arbitrator in the mid-90s. So my experience was first to become a good commercial and business lawyer, to understand how international commercial transactions work. And from there, as a next step, to become involved in actual cases that were arbitrated on the basis of dispute that arose from these kinds of transactions. But today the situation is different, I believe. And I would think that there are two ways of getting involved in arbitration. One is to be incorporated in one of the legal teams in one of the law firms that specialize in arbitration. Because I'm sure that by exposing by the young lawyer being exposed to this training, at the same time is going to grasp issues of substantive law arising out of international business transactions that will provide them with the necessary knowledge of this kind of transactions so that they can better handle arbitration cases. I don't think that they can start directly career as arbitrators. I think that is the best approach to start a career as counsel, giving advice to clients in connection with international transactions, having in mind possible arbitration disputes. Another way is to get involved in the legal departments of big transnational corporations that are exposed to arbitrations, and within the mix of legal issues that the candidate, the young lawyer, is going to be exposed to, arbitration is one of them. So that would be my approach.
What will be, throughout the course of your career, the most interesting case or the most complex case that you had in front of you?
In terms of complexities of cases, I do not remember a single case that was easy and that was not complex. In the area of international commercial arbitration, the industries are so different that each case is a source of a very particular challenge. In the area of investment arbitration, the issues of international law combined with issues of economic and commercial law are of such variety that it is difficult to think of a case that is not complex. Even cases that in terms of the economic interests involved may look at first glance as not raising complex issues, it could be a mistake to think that. It is not the money amount that is the source of complexity or not. So I cannot really answer your question because I cannot identify a case that does not show some sort of complexities. The other reason for that is not only that issues in one sense or the other are so close that it is difficult to clearly and easily identify who is going to win or to lose, but the quality of counsel and experts involved on both sides is such that the presentation of arguments they make is so convincing and so well-grounded that it is very difficult to think of a case that is not complex.
Also, a question that we get a lot, is it important? Would you recommend students to do internships? Is that helpful to build a career in international law?
Another aspect that I think it is important to highlight for those young lawyers or students who would like to get involved in this very fascinating field of international and transnational law is to become interns, to apply for internships, either with the very important international arbitral institutions like the International Chamber of Commerce, the American Arbitration Association, its International Center for Dispute Resolution, the International Center for for the resolution of investment disputes, ICSID, for the settlement of investment disputes, ICSID, and any other institutions. This is very important. This gives a direct approach, a direct approach at understanding how international arbitration works, what the issues that arise, and eventually may become an area from which you can start networking. Networking is important for you to meet people who are actually involved in these cases, for them to know you and how you can contribute to their work. There are some arbitrators who also hire young lawyers to help them in their work. And this is also a very important source of potential, a very good approach to the practice of international arbitration and to know the people who are involved in it. And of course, any incorporation as intern first, and then maybe as a part of the arbitration team in any of the law firms who are regularly involved in international arbitrations, are any of these venues extremely useful, highly recommended. And gosh, I didn't have that opportunity when I was a student in Argentina because arbitration didn't exist. But this is a great opportunity for you people nowadays, and you shouldn't fail to explore that.
Now, something that is very current nowadays. How do you think that that COVID-19 has affected the arbitration world? How have you felt the impact?
The pandemic, of course, is a terrible development. We are all suffering from it. But at the same time, virtual means of communication are a sort of great opportunity for interaction. Just to see the multiplication of webinars, I think it's an overproduction of webinars personally, but what they are doing is underline the importance of communication through the internet. That this is not new. And this is not new in the area of arbitration either. Already the internet and the virtual means of communication were playing. And it is surprising and amazing how fast arbitration has been able to adapt to the new situation of the pandemic by using virtual means. Just compare the situation of dispute resolution by national judiciaries or national courts of law. They haven't been able to adapt to the new situation the way international arbitration has done. So I understand that this situation is a hurdle to be overcome. It is not the same to meet eye to eye and to be able to interact with people. And this is because of the pandemic. But the pandemic is not going to be eternal. But what will remain is the importance of virtual means of communication as a complement in getting in touch with other people. And for instance, if you have virtual conferences, well, participate, put intelligent questions under your name so that the organizers will accept your question, will identify who puts the question. And on the basis of the answer, you can make a follow-up question that shows your knowledge and your interest. And those things are remembered. If your participation is relevant and interesting and shows an interest, I don't think that it will be ignored. Then there is another phenomenon that has to be explored. What is happening with law reviews? Are they more and more also being published online? And what possibilities you have to contribute to those law reviews with an interesting article or comment on a case? So I understand that there are certain problems, obstacles that are difficult to digest, but don't let those obstacles overcome your efforts to interact and to make yourself known in the area of international arbitration.
Which question I didn't ask you and you think is very relevant for those wishing to build a career in international law?
In the Middle East, and if I may go beyond the Middle East, in the Arab world, arbitration has always been confronted with important challenges. But I come from Latin America, part of the world where the hostility against arbitration was very clear. I mentioned the Calvo Doctrine, the Calvo Clause, the Calvo Doctrine, which has been misinterpreted because Carlos Calvo was extremely favorable to arbitration. And arbitration, in the eyes of Carlos Calvo, was the best tool to provide gunboat diplomacy by the great powers at that time, England, France, Italy, Germany, who sent their gunboats to impose their views. But arbitration was a dispute means of the settlement of disputes that could be utilized and could be invoked in order to make the rule of law be the one to be applied to resolve any conflicts between foreigners and Latin American states. So I do understand the reactions against arbitration. Also, many of the Arab countries had bad experiences with early arbitrations, which involved Arab states and private oil companies. But that was in the mid-1950s. We are in 2020. The world has changed a lot. My perception is that in the Arab world, situations are changing. I know that Saudi Arabia has enacted a new arbitration law, which is opening up venues to international arbitration. And it is, I think, a powerful instrument allowing the integration of the Arab world into international arbitration. I think that they are understanding more and more that at the end of the day, international arbitration is a neutral tool. And the more you know how the tool works, and the better trained that lawyers from the Arab countries are, including the Emirates, the more trained they are in international arbitration, the more they can use their tool to the benefit of their economic interests and to their presence in the world, in the world economy. So that would be my message. I see interesting developments. The big word in this area, as in any other areas of human knowledge, is education, and more education. Education is the powerful tool, and I will be surprised how you can turn arbitration into an interesting, important tool in the advancement, but in accordance to the rule of law, of the interests of Arab countries and Arab economic interests.
Thank you so much, Horacio, for your time, for sharing with us your experience and your very helpful notes. I'm very sure that our viewers are gonna be very thankful to you, and I am immensely thankful for this interview and for having taught me the very first information about arbitration. Thank you very much.